Hi guys, today we are doing a voiceover because I did this over a span of a few days. But I made this, we're gonna call it an ephemera holder that I am making specifically for my Kate Curry books. And this one's just gonna be specifically for my holiday images that I want to fussy cut and have ready to use. So I am using, as you can see, based on the black pad of paper, that I'm going to be using black paper for the inside of my book. And I did fold that one in half first so that you could see how, so I could use it as a guide basically. And then I do have my papers here that I'm going to be using. I pulled off the back of two of my scrapbook pads to basically use a chipboard for the cover. Here I am showing you, I am making it maybe about 1/4 of an inch bigger on the sides and on the top of it. So that is going to be about the size. I didn't put exact measurements because it's obviously, if you want to follow along and do something similar, you don't have to use go get the exact paper pad. I do show, however, which one I use, but you can use anything. You can even use something as simple as computer paper. However, I wouldn't recommend it just because it's so thin. But here I am also cutting a strip for the spine. And I do always double up the spine just so that I make sure that it's sturdier. And then I am gluing the white sides together. I don't know why, but every time there's a white side, I always glue them together and leave the brown, I guess, or more organic side showing, the one that's unfinished. It just, I like that one better for the outside only because I feel like most of the time paper glues better to it. So I, end up using that for the outside so that anything I glue on the outside doesn't peel off. So here I am just going to trim off that little bit of white just to make it even and make sure it's nice and clean. So when I, put it together, if it's nice and even. So again, I do want to make sure and use the black paper as my guide to make sure that my chipboard is about 1/4 of an inch bigger all the way around, just so that I have some wiggle room. I'm not the type of person who generally does the pages the same size as the binding, the outer part. So I do always trim it about 1/4 of an inch, sometimes as small as 1/8 of an inch, but I do always leave a gap on there. And then you always do have to make sure that your binding is the same size as well. So here I'm just making sure that it's even the same size. And I am, like I said, using the white part for the inside of the binding. So this tape that I have is actually a medical tape. It's meant to be put kind of like the spongy one. I'm not even sure what they're called, but I know that it's medical tape. I got it from an old first aid kit, and it is a fabric tape. So I have been using it for crafts, and I've been really enjoying it for binding books just because it is fabric. So the only thing is, because it's old, the tackiness of the glue on it has kind of gone away quite a bit. So I do always just use glue, but the fact that it's fabric really does help. So if you don't have fabric, you could, this medical tape that's fabric, you could just use a piece of fabric in place of this, or the normal like painter's tape, the beige one. I would recommend that one if you don't have. That's what I used before I ran into this one. And then I am going to be binding it at the end with fabric anyway, so that'll reinforce it. But like I said, I've been using this one just because I have it, and it's been really helpful to keep everything from falling apart. And like I said, I do use glue to reinforce it. And I did put this on the inside. As I start working on it, I realize I don't have enough. So I do just end up using it on the edges to kind of reinforce. And because I'm going to use fabric on the outside anyways, it's not really going to matter. But even one layer of this really does help reinforce the binding. And as you can see here, I'm just finishing up putting the leftover tape just as a reinforcement, like I mentioned before, just to make sure that the edges are really sealed together and it's not going to rip on me. Since it is something I'm going to be using on a normal basis, at least throughout the winter holidays. And again, just using some of that glue to glue it together and keep it in place. And anytime you are using tape or actually anything to bind, two pieces of chipboard for binding, you do want to bend it and make sure it kind of stretches out and fits in between the little cracks that you leave in there, because you do want to leave a minor crack in there to make sure that you are able to fold it. If not, it will end up tearing and peeling off over time. And as you can see here, I am just cutting some of this paper that I'm going to be using for, this is going to be the inside. And every time I do this specific technique, I do always check that my paper fits, because I've done it to where I didn't measure and then it was too thick. And, like I said, I had to peel it off and kind of trim it down. And that's exactly what I did here. I had to trim it just a little bit. And I even checked, I folded it in half to see if it was the same size, which it was. It was just my binding, the center chipboard was a little bit more narrow towards the bottom of it. So I had to cut it down to make sure that it was, that the cardstock paper here that I'm using, the printed paper, was going to be the right size and fit. So when I fold it in half, it would fit properly. And here I do always use a generous amount of glue just because I don't want it lifting up. And I want the most permanent glue adhesion as possible. And then instead of cutting that little bit off, I do just fold it over. And then I did use some of this. This is a tape that I was talking about that you could use for the binding if you don't have the other one. I do love this particular kind of tape because you can use it and leave it underneath and just glue over, and the glue will glue right to it. It's not like regular Scotch tape or the clear plastic tape that glue doesn't stick onto. So this one is perfect for that because it is sort of like a paper base. And for the inside, I'm still using the same paper here. I do decide to take off the lid, as you're going to see in a minute. I didn't seal that right, and like a dummy, I forgot. And when I went to go put the other paper, I splattered out a big old glop, big old glop of glue. But back to the project. I do spread it with a little piece of scrap. I always use a scrap piece of paper of the chipboard to sort of use it as a little paintbrush, if you will, to kind of spread out the glue. Honestly, that is my favorite technique. I don't like using a brush, just because I don't ever get up to go wash it after, or in between uses, and I don't keep a cup of water just because I don't want to spill it and have that water go everywhere. So that's just not, it doesn't work out for me. I'm very clumsy and things get knocked down often. So the best option for me is to use a little piece of paper or chip or whatever I'm working with to spread it out, and then I can throw that piece of paper as it dries. And here I am. It is better if you fold the edges. Oh, there we go. It is better if you fold the edges first. That way you can make sure that it bends properly. And then I do add the glue and start to glue it down. And here I am, as you can see, bending it again. You do want to always bend it and burnish it real well. So you do want to rub the paper against the chipboard to make sure that it's gluing properly. And I don't think I mentioned this, but I do always cut out the corners that way. That way I can bend it over. And because that was going to be the inside, I don't want the paper peeling up. Sometimes when you make these kind of covers, the more you use it, the more it's likely to lift up. So if you do it on one side, it'll stick and you won't have a problem, causing liftage on the corners. So I do always use one side and basically seal the edges of the chipboard as well into it. So for the centerpiece, this is gonna be the outside of what's gonna end up being the outside. I am just go ahead and putting the whole piece like this that goes over the two, like the front and the back cover, not just the center like I did with the inside, only because it does add reinforcements, and I am going to end up, I can't speak today, collaging the front and the back, and then putting some fabric, it's actually burlap, as the binding in the back. So this is just more for reinforcement and to just kind of give it a more uniform look, because burlap, it's not exactly see-through, but you can see a little bit peeking through it. So I wanted it to just kind of be uniformed throughout the whole thing. And like I said, it does reinforce it. It gives it that extra strength, so that it doesn't fall apart. And like I said, I'm going to be using this for my little ephemera that I can use for my cake curry books. So I want it to be nice and secure. I've done quite a few of these, this type of binding for books, journals, and I feel like it's really important that you sort of bend it a little bit like I just did, just to kind of loosen up the paper. Sometimes when you don't do it and you let it dry that way, when you go to bend it, it does end up like breaking. It really does look like it broke the paper, which in reality it's kind of tearing it, but it does damage the spine a little bit. So it's important that you kind of stretch it out a bit, especially while the glue is still wet, and not fold it all the way, because then you end up with these weird bubbles, but just sort of slightly bending it so that it stretches out that paper. So here, as you can see, I am going to be collaging the book, the front and the back of the book. And I did pick up papers, or chose, not pick up, chose papers that were themed Halloween, fall, and Christmas, just because these are the books that I'm specifically, not the books, I'm sorry, the images that I'm going to be putting in here for those specific holidays. I kind of thought about doing all holidays in general, but then I'm like, okay, well, then it's going to end up being some humongous book. So I broke it down for, this is going to be fall into Christmas book for all my images for my Kate Curry books that I ordered off of Amazon. So again, I am doing wet glue. A lot of times I do use glue stick, but because this was cardstock paper from paper pads from Michael's or Joann's that I had, I am putting regular, basically school glue type of glue, PVA glue, to adhere it, just because it's thicker, it's not going to warp, and then it is more permanent than a glue stick. Glue sticks kind of tend to peel up a little bit over time, especially if it's something you use all the time. And because this isn't going to be a journal that I kind of use on it and then eventually put away, because I do store all my journals after I finish them. I do collect them, but because I'm going to be using this often to work in my journals, I did want to make sure that it was nice and glued on and sturdy on here, so it won't peel over time. And as I'm sure you don't want to see me collage for another 10 minutes, I'll just do this one piece and then come back showing you what I've done with this whole back piece. And like magic, ta-da! Just kidding. So basically this is it, all collaged up, the whole back. And again, it's important to bend it as you go now that it's that spine has begun to dry. And then this is the burlap that I was talking about that I'm going to be using. It was a little sack for a Christmas gift that I got for years, that I've had for like years. That I probably dollar store, honestly, that I got Dollar Tree. So I am cutting it down, and I'm trying to cut it as straight as possible that it goes along the grain or the lines of how it's woven, just because I am going to pull a few fibers out so that it's sort of frayed on the edges. So I do try to cut it as straight as possible, kind of following the lines of the threads. And as you can see here, I am pulling, I did pull about 3 or 4 threads just to sort of give it a little beard of I want to say hairs, but threads of the burlap. And then I do cut it here just kind of it's a little cleaner cut. And then, like I said, I do pull out some threads. And then every time I do this, I do, normally if it's regular fabric, I do just cut a little snippet and tear it. But on this one, because it was burlap, it doesn't exactly tear. So I did leave the top edge, the one that's going to be glued at the end without cutting yet, just because I didn't know where exactly it was going to be cut. So I do glue it, do cut it at the end. And here I am just adding glue. Normally I've been using fabric tack for this, but I've run out. I have an order of it coming in from Amazon because I do use it quite a bit, just because it's so quick dry and it's permanent. But I am using the same glue here, and I'm just spreading it out with the cardboard just to make it cleaner, because if not, you end up with globs of dried glue that will be seen once it's done. So it just gives it a cleaner look if you kind of spread it out a bit. And as you can see, once you kind of spread it out, you can't even see that crease of the fabric in a minute when I do it. And here I am just cutting it, and again, as straight as possible so that I could pull out those threads and make it match, so that it has a little beard of threads on it. I keep wanting to say hair, but it's not hair. And at this point, I do fold it and kind of leave it as it is so that it dries correctly. And then here I am just as you can tell, you can see the glue that seeped out through because I didn't rub it prior. But I do put it on here so that I can make sure that all the edges are fully dried. And see, you got to straighten it out every time. So while that dries, I did put together my little signatures. I am using, again, this black paper, and I'm doing signatures of 3s. So I'm kind of putting them all together. And initially, you'll see that I did have plans of just threading them in through my elastic band, but I do end up switching it over to sewing them individually, each individual signature, just because it wiggles a lot. But you'll see that in a minute. Okay, and like I said, I got this one from Dollar Tree. Honestly, I wouldn't recommend it. I would get a different brand. But what we're going to do is we are going to be wrapping it around the length of the binding of the book, which this one was a bit tangled, so it took me a minute here to unwind. But you are going to wrap it around as many times as you want each signature. So if you have, like, for instance, 6 signatures, you would do it 6 times. However, because this one's so stretchy, if you get the same elastic, I would do -1. So if you have 6 signatures, do 5, wrap it around 5 times, just so it's a little more taut and you don't have so much of the wiggling on the pages. But like I said, count how many you need. For me, I ended up adding a whole extra signature, so I just kind of wrapped it around one more time to tighten up the elasticity of the elastic. And then just when you're doing it, just make sure to try to keep it in place as much as possible. You'll see in a minute when I do it, when I kind of tighten, you want to pull the edges to kind of release the tension, and so that they're all evenly stretchable, if that makes sense. So when you do that, they do kind of get mixed up. So I would highly suggest try to just keep them as neat as possible. And then tie a knot. I left a little extra because I did want to put some dangles on mine, some beads. I'm not sure what I'm going to put on here yet, but I do know that I want to put something to hang off of the end of those, just because it makes it cuter to look at. And this is exactly where I mean that I pulled them to even out the tension between each one. But see the mess that I've created. So honestly, I would probably slide a pencil to keep them all in place on both ends and kind of stretch it out without mixing them all up. That would be my recommendation, unless you don't mind, and then just do it the same way. And I just went back and kind of fixed them so that they're straight on the inside, because on the outside, when you're wrapping it around like this, it's never going to be even. So every time I do this similar type of binding, I do tie a knot with the elastic or the thread, whatever I use, in the center, because see, they always look like this. So it doesn't matter if you keep it even or not, it won't be even. So I just always tie them in the center. I do run the ends one underneath and just tie it, and then hang. Like I said, I do want to hang a bead out from underneath there, or on the ends of those elastic pieces. And then once you have them in here, it's as easy as sliding one signature per elastic cord. The only thing, like I mentioned, was that as I started to put in, because this was my original plan to leave it like this, and then just slide the papers into each cord. The only thing is that as I started putting my little pieces, like my cutout ephemera pieces, I realized that the pages would shift a lot in there, and as they shifted, they were sort of damaging my pieces. So I do end up sewing each individual signature. So every 3 pages I did sew to keep them in place, and they're still going in there like the same way. It's just they're all sewed into little bunches. And here I did want to show you guys what I did, because like I said, I did have to end up adding another additional signature. And I just kind of showed you the process of it. So I'm basically doing a simple 3 stitch binding, and I am using this just I was gonna say elastic, it's not elastic, silver cord. So I do pierce it in three different areas. I'm doing them all three holes closer towards the center. I'm not going very high up. It really is a preference. And then when you measure out your cord, just make sure that you do it 3 times the length from the top hole to the bottom hole. And I've done this a couple of different ways, but I found that the easiest way is to always start in the middle hole. So I always start from the inside of the binding, or the inside of the pages. I go outside, and then I always go to the bottom hole. And then from there, some people go through the middle hole and make an 8-figure. I just go straight to the top hole. So straight to the top hole. See, I was showing that you can go through the middle and go through the top hole. And then every time I go back in the hole, to make sure that I don't put the needle through the thread, I always grab the tip of the thread, pull it towards the bottom of the page, which now it's really the top, and then stab the needle through the remaining hole, so that that ensures that you don't actually stick your needle through the thread, because then you won't be able to pull the thread taut, so that it's, you don't have extra thread and have those pages wiggling all over the place. So I do just tie in here, and then I do always do a triple knot on these and cut off the tips. And then from this point, it's pretty easy. You would just stick it in like you would like we did the first time. And at this point, as you can see, all the pages have been binded together, all my individual signatures of 3 pages, just because, like I said, it made it easier. And they won't be wiggling around. They'll still be slightly wiggling, but they won't, each sheet individually won't be wiggling around and damaging my little cutouts. And here I'm just kind of showing you the books that I plan to put in here that are holiday themed. And I kind of had them, I've been working on this throughout a few days, kind of cutting all my ephemera out. And see, I still have some Halloween. I've actually finished all the Halloween book. By the time you watch this, I've already cut all my Halloween stuff. And I do like, the reason I do this is because I do like having my individual ephemera pieces cut out, ready to use. That way I don't have to go through the book, pick the one I want, cut it out, take forever to cut it out. I like to have everything ready to go so that I can just peel off, whatever image I'm going to use, look through it. Oh, I want to use the squirrel. I don't know, the squirrel that just came up here. I'll peel it off and then it's good to go and I can put it on whatever piece of art that I want to use or make. And then here I'm showing you that it's quite wiggly. So that's why I'm saying I do end up adding a whole other signature. I kind of pull them out tighter and pass it one more time around the binding. But here I am showing you how easy it is to remove. It does have double-sided sticky tape on the back that I used to keep them in place, but they're also easily removable. And I do have it organized by holiday, first Halloween, then fall, then Christmas. And then stuck them. See, this is the tape I was going to show you. This is the tape that I used. I got it off Amazon. It was like 8 of them for $10. And then I just simply put a little strip and stick them. And like I said, I do have them in categories by holiday and then by type. So these are all my animals. And I just kind of group them all together. And see, very easy to reorganize, especially as I start placing them. That way I can fit as many as I can in one page where I could see the majority of it and I know which one I want to use. So yeah, that's basically it. I'm just kind of sticking my last ones here. Thank you so much for watching again, guys. I appreciate it. And I hope you guys like it. And if you like the idea, I hope you guys try it out. Thank you so much. See you guys next time. Bye.